Good morning, and thank you for joining me on the Path to Liberty. This is the Fast Friday edition of the show for May 1st, 2020. Today, I'm talking about a guy named William Barr. I think he has a long history of attacking the Constitution and your liberty, so I want to go over briefly some of his worst transgressions, from warrantless phone surveillance to the Patriot Act, asset forfeiture, and I'll even touch on, briefly, a little bit on Ruby Ridge. But first of all, my name is Michael Bolden. We broadcast live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time from here in my home office and studio in downtown Los Angeles for the 10th Amendment Center. We've got a bunch of live streaming video platforms, a number of archive-only video platforms, plus archive-only audio podcast editions. You can find all of those platforms, all the channels that we're on, show notes, all the archives. I include links for each episode for you to read more and learn more about the topics that I'm talking about. You can also find our email newsletters, social media platforms, and our membership program, which starts out as little as $2 a month, and we make it go a long way here at the TAC. Find all of that information and more over at the show homepage. That's 10thamendmentcenter.com/path to liberty, all spelled out. Again, 10thamendmentcenter.com/path to liberty. I'm really grateful for you spending some of your time with me today. I couldn't thank you enough for being here with me, whether you're watching or listening live or in the archive. And I hope you are as safe, as happy, as healthy, and as stocked up as can be. But I promise to not take up too much of your time today. Since this is Fast Friday, let's see if I can get this done in about 10 minutes or so. I first want to start out with the man we call the father of the Constitution, James Madison, in a speech in Virginia Convention in 1829. And I think this really should inform so much of how we approach politicians and bureaucrats today. He says, "The essence of government is power, and power lodged as it must be in human hands will ever be liable to abuse." And even if we don't know this exact quote, or we haven't heard this before, if you haven't heard this before, you've heard something similar, whether it's the famous Lord Acton quote of "power corrupts," and absolute power corrupts absolutely. There are many founders who had their own version of this, from Samuel Adams and Patrick Henry, for example. George Mason, I just covered in recent weeks as well. They knew that giving a single person or just a small group of people too much power, consolidation is what they called it, was the great threat to liberty, because then you end up with a single person making a decision over a great geographic area or a large number of people, and every time they screw up and they do something wrong. And this gets to the heart of what the 10th Amendment and decentralization and federalism under the Constitution is all about. So they recognized that you never want to give a single person too much power. And these days, in government today, there is a great example of power lodged in human hands, ever liable to abuse, and that's a guy named William Barr. I want to cover a little bit from an article that we published just a few hours ago this morning by Mike Meharry, and he says, "A lot of people may not remember this, but this is Barr's second go-around as Attorney General. He also served under President George H.W. Bush from November 1991 through 1993. And here's the first thing that I want to focus on. Barr is terrible on the Fourth Amendment, your natural right to privacy, and in support of warrantless mass surveillance. In fact, he's one of the architects of the modern surveillance state that we have today. He's one of the guys that really got it off the ground. So Mike points out that during his time under George H.W. Bush, just in a matter of a few years, he set the foundation for the modern federal surveillance state. As a dedicated drug warrior, Barr directed the DEA, which shouldn't exist, to collect bulk phone data on millions of people. They call that the CDR, the Call Details Records or Call Data Records Program. This under the Patriot Act, Section 215 today. This is really where it got its start. Mike writes, "The DOJ ordered telephone companies to secretly hand over the records of all phone calls from the U.S. to countries the feds suspected drug traffickers were operating, and it eventually included over 100 countries. Now, with modern technology today, you make a phone call just to someone across the country. Because of data packets bouncing around, that data is crossing through all kinds of countries. So basically, they have this as an excuse to do whatever they want, collect everyone's information. USA Today reported that the program, quote, was the government's first known effort to gather data on Americans in bulk, sweeping up records of telephone calls made by millions of citizens, regardless of whether they were suspected of a crime. And to power-hungry people like Barr, to the deep state, to the NSA, just existing and communicating with other people is enough to warrant collecting your information, building a profile on you, tracking you, tracing you, and more. So William Barr is one of the modern architects of the federal surveillance state, the international surveillance state that we live under right now. Mike points out that the NSA actually ultimately used this blueprint to develop its mass warrantless bulk surveillance program. And of course, based on that, we know that Barr was probably a big supporter, a cheerleader for the Patriot Act. And Mike covers this as well in his article. He says, during congressional testimony in 2003, he called the bill a major step forward. Anyone calling the Patriot Act a positive thing hates the Constitution, knows nothing about it, or a combination of the above. He argued that the FISA, Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, quote, remains too restrictive because it still requires that the government establish probable cause that an individual is either a foreign power or an agent of a foreign power. This is a quote from Barr himself. It's too restrictive because it requires that the government establish probable cause. Mike puts it this way. In other words, Barr argued that the government should be able to ignore that pesky warrant requirement in the Fourth Amendment. And this is an ongoing thing from the 90s, early 2000s, and even now he's also attacking things that protect privacy. He absolutely can't stand encryption. So he doesn't like encrypted communication, whether it's Signal or Red Phone, or even just encryption on Facebook Messenger. In fact, he actually sent an open letter to Mark Zuckerberg urging him to not include end-to-end encryption on Facebook messaging platforms. Here's how he put it. Companies should not deliberately design their systems to preclude any form of access to content, even for preventing or investigating the most serious crimes. This privacy protection, according to him, if you're private, if you don't want your information shared, he says this puts our citizens and societies at risk. And of course, they always want to use fear-mongering and scare tactics for people to give up their liberty. Asset forfeiture is another area where this guy's a problem, and he always has been. And Mike points out that he's a big fan of civil asset forfeiture. We can call it legalized government theft. It is illegal. It is unconstitutional. It's a total rip-off armed robbery. He told Senator Mike Lee from Utah that civil asset forfeiture during his most recent confirmation hearing is, quote, a valuable tool for state and local law enforcement. He also took the same type of position back in 1991 during those confirmation hearings. He called civil forfeiture such an important program. The following year, he authored a report on civil asset forfeiture for the DOJ, and he said, quote, the asset forfeiture program is a top priority of the Department of Justice and has my strong personal support. This is not a guy who's in favor of liberty, period. And then I also mentioned that he was not a good guy when it came to Ruby Ridge. And this is how Mike puts it. He says, while we're on the subject of the police state, Barr was a devout defender of an FBI agent who gunned down an unarmed woman holding her baby in 1992. I'm not going to get into all the grisly details of what went on there or the issues of Randy Weaver and all that other stuff. But the bottom line is there were some bad things that happened from the FBI, and Barr was all about defending them and protecting them so they can basically continue doing what they're doing. Jim Bovard, who is an incredible reporter, writer, columnist, and the like, he called it, quote, one of the worst scandals during Barr's time as Attorney General. And Barr defended the whole problem, the gunning down of this woman holding her baby, the taunting of her basically while her body lie there. He said, defended this not just in word, but also in deed. He told a panel during his confirmation hearing that he, quote, assisted in framing legal arguments advanced in the district court and the subsequent appeal to the Ninth Circuit, basically organizing former attorneys general and others to support the federal agent's defense against criminal charges related to that Ruby Ridge incident. And Mike gives a great summary on this. Basically, a lot of people we notice are really cheering on this guy as someone who's going to come in and protect us from other petty tyrants on our state or a local level. But with a history like this, and this is just a fast example of some of the most prominent things, there are other areas where he's been bad on the Constitution and liberty as well. He says, I'm going to take a hard pass on cheering on this particular person. This is not the guy I want protecting me. He says Barr has already proved that he can't be trusted with power. Giving him more is a fool's errand. And regarding power and corruption, a couple more quick quotes before we head out for the day and the weekend. Here's John Adams back when he was really one of the best back in spring of 1772 in Notes for an Oration at Braintree. He said, there is danger from all men. The only maxim of a free government ought to be to trust no man living with power to endanger the public liberty. And I think Patrick Henry in the Virginia Ratifying Convention had one of the best of the best. This was June 7th, 1788. He said, show me that age and country where the rights and liberties of the people were placed on the sole chance of their rulers being good men without a consequent loss of liberty. Well, I hope you guys found this interesting. I hope you found it educational. It's not really great news, but I wanted to cover these important things. As long as people are talking about William Barr, I hope you learned something that's more important than anything. And as I say every single time, I hope you are as happy, as safe, as healthy, and as stocked up as can be. I really appreciate you being here with me today. If you support the show, you can join us as a member for as little as $2 a month. That's 10thamendmentcenter.com/members. I see a number of you out there that have been members either for a short or a long time in almost every episode. So thank you so much for that. And if you can't, there's no pressure. If you're not able to do it, if you're not able to financially support, I'm still grateful for you being here. I want to hear your feedback. I want to see your comments. If you've got ideas for shows in the future, you can email me, team@10thamendmentcenter.com. And of course, you can help us spread the word for free, sharing links to each episode, whatever platform you happen to prefer, smashing the like button, comments, reviews on iTunes and other podcast platforms. All of those actions, it triggers the algorithm of the platform you may be watching or listening on, and it tells that platform to show the program to more people. We continue to grow. We continue to reach more and more people every episode, every week, every month, and we're going to keep plugging away, setting the foundation on the path to liberty. Thanks again for joining me. I hope you have a good weekend, and I'll see you next time here on the path to liberty.